How to read a firewall rule. Right. If the source IP address of the packet is your home IP address, which is so and so, and if your destination IP address of the packet is so and so, and if your destination port of the packet is TCP port 80 and port 443, and if you are coming from the WAN zone to the DMZ zone, then I will allow that traffic. That's what this rule means. I believe it's quite simple to figure out what your source is and what the destination IP is and what the service is. The service is the destination port, TCP port 80, port 443. Your source, what's the source IP of your packet? What's the destination IP of your packet? What could be confusing is the from and to, and also the destination, but I'll explain that later. So the from and to zone. You're coming from, your packet is coming from the WAN zone and intends to go to the DMZ zone. How will the firewall rule know what you're intending to go to? Through the NAT policies. What does that mean? How can someone on the internet access your web server? Well, first they have to talk to your firewall. They can't access the web server directly through its own IP address, through the IP address of the web server, which is 10.10.10.10. Instead, they have to access your firewall's IP address. So let's read the NAT policy for the website in the DMZ. If your IP address is anything, I'm not going to translate it. Or let's read it this way. If your source IP is anything, and you're destined for my IP address, specifying either port 80, specifying either TCP port 80 or TCP port 443 coming in the X1 interface, then I will not translate your source. I will translate your destination IP address to the IP address of the web server, kind of like redirecting you to the web server, and I will not translate your services. So this is kind of like redirecting. This NAT policy is a policy that would not change your source, but it would redirect where you are going to. And it doesn't change your service either. So it just redirects the final destination of the packet. Initially, the final destination of the packet was this. And then this firewall that has this IP address has a policy to redirect, not necessarily redirect, but to translate that packet so that it redirects that packet to the DMZ web server IP address. The DMZ web server IP address. We're talking about how does a firewall rule know what zone you're going to? Well, it's going to 10.10.10.10. What zone does that belong to? Let's find out. How will the firewall find out? Let's see. Let's look at the routes. 10.10.10.10. Destination. Nope, that's not it. That's not my destination. That's not my destination. That's not my destination. That's my destination. That's a 10.10.10 slash .0/24 network. So 10.10.10.10 belongs here. Alright? So if my source is anything and I'm headed for the network that 10.10.10.10 belongs to, then I will leave interface X2. Okay, but I want to find out what zone 10.10.10.10 belongs to. Well, here's the clue, interface X2. What is the zone that belongs to interface X2? Over here we could look at this. Oh, X2, it's right there. And it's part of the DMZ zone. Okay, gotcha. So the DMZ zone has a member, and that member is X2. So X2 belongs to the DMZ zone. Where's another place we could look at that? We could look for that at interfaces. X2. X2, what zone is that associated with the DMZ zone? So that's how we find out what zone a packet is destined for. And this all ties back to the firewall access rule. Where are you coming from, the WAN, the internet, to the DMZ, where your web server resides in? So let's read this firewall rule again. If you're coming from the WAN zone and you want to get to the DMZ zone, and your source IP address is your home IP address, and you're destined for the destination IP address of the packet is my X1 IP address, which is my WAN IP address, with the destination port of HTTP and HTTPS ports, then I will allow that traffic through, or I'll do business with that traffic, or I'll interact with that traffic in a way that's not saying no or ignoring that packet. So that's just a very high level concept, or not high level, very surface level concept. Hope that's simple to understand. I don't think there's anything else I should add onto that. We kind of covered how to find out what zone that belongs to. How do you find out what zone? How do I know it's coming from a certain zone? Well, it depends on the interface that packet comes in from. Just like how we could associate one interface with a zone, that interface that it comes in from is also associated with the zone. Destination IP address. Why is this X1? Why is this the IP address? Why is this the public IP address of the firewall instead of the IP address of the web server itself? And in this example, my X1 IP address is a private IP address, but let's just pretend it's a public IP address that if you try to access with HTTP and HTTPS, you'll be able to get to my website. But let's just pretend that, right? Let's pretend this is a public IP address. Why specify the public IP address, and why not specify the private IP address of the web server? Why not specify the IP address of the web server over here? Because before the firewall applies any policies or any rules or interacts with the packet in a way that would change that packet, that firewall would have to know if it can do business or it could interact with that packet in that sort of way. And it does that by checking to see if it has a rule that applies to that specific packet before it makes any changes to it. So it will apply the firewall rule before it makes any changes to that packet. And once that firewall rule allows that specific packet, then the SonicWall firewall can start changing that packet. Then it's going to change that destination IP address of the packet to the IP address of the web server, like so. If your initial destination IP address is the IP address of my public IP address, then, and if the firewall rule says that that the firewall should allow that traffic through, then I can apply this policy to that packet, and I will change the destination IP address of that packet to the IP address of my web server. Okay, I think that's enough for NAT policies and firewall rules, but let me know what's not clear, I guess. Perhaps I'll delete this and make a new one if I'm missing out something that you think is not explained very well. Anyways, ciao.